everybody, welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. I'm Molly Herford, and when I'm not recording these podcasts or writing articles all about various endurance sports and training and nutrition, I am hopefully outside practicing both good training and good nutrition.
And I'm Peter Glassford. I'm a registered kinesiologist and an endurance coach, and you're here on the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we look at different types of movement and sport from all different perspectives to try and learn something about ourselves and healthy living and just other ways we might be moving through the world.
Yeah, lots of moving, although not through the world for us this past week. I had probably my biggest, I think, training week I've had in a while running, but we've been in one place, which is pretty miraculous for us.
Yeah, I mean, you've been moving through your tiny world, but you're not traveling the world. But
I enjoy my tiny little world. I was saying the other day, unlike Peter, who I think thrives on the more adventure rides and always checking out at least one new road or route or trail or something during every ride, I would be equally happy just going out and back on the one trail near our house, which is kind of sad for me, but you know what? I enjoy it. That's what I like.
Well, I explored a dead-end gravel road today and ran into 2 deer that I sat and watched. It was quite nice.
I'm just imagining you getting to the end and being like, all right, I'm not going to flip around. How am I going to get through these woods?
Well, the dilemma was that indeed there would be a way to get through, but it involved a ski hill and a lot of mud today. So we're going to table that adventure for a couple weeks here as we've gotten our big spring cleaning shower, which Molly always laughs how Canadians sort of excuse their rainy.
The rain, it's so great. Aren't we so lucky to be getting this 18 straight days of rain?
Need it. We really needed it. Yeah.
We did not.
Well, it cleans things up, is what they say.
Does not.
So we're doing that. We're dealing with spring. We got a nice consistent April here. We're sort of building towards some May races.
I ran 1 billion miles this weekend.
I don't know about 1 billion, but you're putting in consistent and slowly increasing volume with some appropriate intensity sprinkled in between.
1 billion miles.
And lots of recovery. So, yeah. So that's about that. So what do we have news-wise?
Well, Shred Girls is out 2 weeks from today. That's Shred Girls Lindsay's Joyride. It's book 1 in the series. Super excited about that. So if you've pre-ordered on Amazon, it's getting closer to when you'll actually receive it in the mail. Yay! And if you haven't pre-ordered and you're still thinking about it, now is the time. I'm sending out stickers pretty much daily at this point, actually, because people keep emailing me with their pre-orders, and anyone that does pre-order, let me know. I will send you these really cool Shred Girl stickers. So that's coming up. I'm freaking out.
Yep, and we're definitely doing still the launch party in Markham, Ontario, near the Greater Toronto area. We're at Joyride Bike Park, so you can look that up. It's at shred-girls.com as well, and that's open to anyone who wants to come and ride around.
Mm-hmm.
It should be a good time.
Yeah, I'm super stoked. What else? I think that's pretty much our big thing right now. That's what the big push is about. I am pretty much just immersed in that world. I'm working on edits on book number 2 right now, and that's taken me out to, it's more West Coast and a little downhill based. Very, very mountain bikey, which is actually pretty appropriate for today's guest.
Yeah, we have Geoff Kabush, who's a returning guest, second time or third time? Second time.
But this will be the, I think, 5th time we've had a Kabush on the podcast.
Danelle, Geoff's sister, it has been on 3 times.
Yep.
She was just on recently, which is a great episode, dealing with energy balance and some sports psych concepts. So definitely check that out if you haven't. But Geoff's back, and we'll link to the previous episode with him as well. And so what we're talking about today is sort of how his training's evolved. I think since he's been on, he's even shifted more so away from, the traditional cross-country Olympic disciplines.
All right, let's back up. So Geoff Kabush is one of Canada's most decorated mountain bikers. I can't even tell you how many times he's been national champion. He's 2 or 3-time Olympian.
2, for sure, yeah.
2-time Olympian, did quite well in one of the Olympics. he's been racing for
He's won a World Cup, which is also
huge,
a big deal for Canada.
Racing
he's done
for well over 2 decades.
And I think like that's really good, but he's also made a name for himself as being like just like I think fairly approachable and like always a fun story, but he also races all sorts of disciplines. Like he's always at Cross Vegas racing cyclocross and different cyclocross races. He's lately been doing some gravel and some longer distance stuff like Dirty Kanza, and then some stage racing as well. But yeah, Geoff's been around since sort of the glory days even of mountain biking, and won Norbas back in the day when they were like massive and the prize purses were bigger and much more consistent series and stuff. So he's got a lot of good stories and a lot of really good experience. And I always like talking to Geoff because he's very consistent. He loves geeking out on stuff and the training he loves. But he's never really like too far down like a rabbit hole. And I think that speaks to his consistency. He's tried different things. We talk a little bit about Spyro Tiger and breathing into balloons and stuff today and altitude training. But the heart of his training is like he rides his mountain bike a lot. And that's what he's gotten good at over a lot of years, right? So I think that's what I always like talking to Geoff about, is just sort of that, I don't know what you call that, just the fundamentals, right?
Fundamentals, consistency, love of the sport.
Yeah, so what we talk about today then is we talk how he set his bike up and he tweaks and hacks and things he had for the Moab Rock stage race. So anyone doing mountain bike stage races or any type of stage racing this year will be into that, and some of the little things he carried with him and how he prepared. And then we also talk a bit about gravel bike setup. He's doing Dirty Kanza and a couple other big gravel races. So we talk a bit about sort of what that looks like with all the heat and the distance and the fueling and stuff. He talks a bit about his fueling strategies in both those events.
So I really liked the talk of bike setup. It's something I talk about all the time when I do bike shop talks, is a lot of us kind of get our bikes either fit by someone else or like just set up for us at the bike shop. And that's sort of it. We just kind of assume that that's the best way to set up our bike. So I think it's really cool to notice that even at the highest level, you're still making these little tweaks and changes yourself, and, being willing to play with that.
Well, and I think it's sometimes the difference between like fitting a bike versus setting it up. So, I mean, he's going in this case between different disciplines and setting up different bikes. So sometimes it's like just getting the bike set up for you, which is an element of fitting, right? But there's the, moving of levers and lockout levers. And we talk a bit about like the bento box and where all the bags are. And Geoff actually has a really cool thing where he tried a bento box. His bike had like a thing for it, and he was going to use it for Dirty Cans. It seemed like what people did, but then he has a bit, his one knee kicks in a bit. And it actually would brush on the bento box, so he actually just got rid of that. But
200 miles of brushing would get real annoying.
So it's a lot of it is that gameplay or that testing, right? So we talk a bit about that and using the packs and stuff like that as well, because it's definitely, that's sort of the thing. And we, in the last podcast with Geoff, we talked about enduro racing, which is a whole other bike and a whole other ordeal. And he talked about how like a lot of the specific preparation beyond his normal sort of consistent training, the normal intervals and volume and stuff he would do just to remain fit, was just getting out on the enduro bike so that he'd use the dropper post and get used to that slight different position and the bigger suspension and all the levers and carrying the pack and the helmets and everything else. So yeah, that's what I mean. Like it's not rocket science, but I think we forget that sometimes, right? Where we actually have to get out mountain biking with all our gear, right? And I've been super proud. I have a few clients going for Dirty Kanza, and they've been all out riding with, way too much stuff for the rides they're doing, the training rides, because they're not a 12 and 13 and 14 hour ride, but they're weighting themselves down like they're going to have to between the aid stations, right? And for these big days.
And I think that applies not just to cycling. I mean, I've been doing that with running. I'm going out on these, 45-minute runs, and I'm wearing my vest that I'll wear for a 50K.
Yep.
And it's, it's not necessarily even weight at that point. For me, it's more just getting used to where the vest is like touching. And so sort of similar to Geoff, like I've had to make a couple adjustments because my elbow is brushing this thing and I don't want it to be brushing for hours at a time.
Yeah, and just figure out where all that food is and how to get in your mouth. We talked in our last Q&A, I think, a bit about that, and we've talked a few times about sort of the skill of fueling, but it's so common, first race or different race, first race of the season, first race ever, where it's like, oh, I just couldn't eat or drink because it was just so hectic. And it's like, well, I mean, it's hectic, but I mean, that's the race you're in, right? Like the Tour de France people can drink and they have to do that, right? So in cross country mountain biking, people figure it out. So even in a tight single track or something, right? Like there's ways around this. It might be a pack for certain people. It might be figuring out how to hold that bottle and pull it out while things are all crazy, right? But it gets back to that. Well, if you can go out and maybe do some intervals or ride that bike in that situation.
All right. Well,
I'm just trying to think what else. Yeah, we talk a bit about doping too, which is something like Jeff's really into. So yeah, I think,
not into.
Yeah, I mean the anti-doping for sure.
There we go.
I don't know how much he like studies the art of doping or anything, but he's very much against doping and dopers. So we talk a bit about that because I think in some ways I don't know that our opinions clash, but I think it is like I'm not as overtly out there against doping, and so Geoff had tweeted something about people like making more of a obvious stand against it, and so I just wanted his opinion on that because it was a little different from my like sit in the middle and never say anything. Not that I'm even it's I don't even know how to say it, but it's a delicate issue. So I think we talk on that for a while. Hopefully it doesn't go too negative for anyone, but I think it's worth talking about, and hopefully this is my contribution to putting it out there that doping is bad.
You heard it here first,
yes,
folks.
Breaking. And then, the one thing you do need to know, hopefully you haven't skipped past this yet. There is a video that Geoff put out last year that we actually talked about in the last podcast where he does, drinks a beer, does 50 push-ups, drinks another beer. And this is his like training for Belgium is sort of this video he's put out. So we do reference that. So it's important that that. We'll link to it in the show notes, but that's the concept of sort of the Belgian training that there's a question about during the podcast.
It is a joke. Please don't actually train like that.
I don't know. He did okay when he went to Belgium.
Okay. Train for 25 years, race 2 Olympics, win countless national
titles. Surround that beer by enough volume and you'll be okay.
Yeah. All right. Without further ado, let's get into today's podcast with Geoff Kabush.
We've had a pretty exciting couple of weeks here. Some really cool results to watch. What have you been up to?
Yeah, it's kind of nice. My season these days starts a bit later, a little less pressure. Really enjoyed a nice winter this year. Taking some time off the bike on some snow skiing in Canada and down here in Truckee, Tahoe, where I'm hanging now, and kind of started this season a couple weeks ago out in Moab at the Moab Rocks stage race. It's always kind of a fun, relaxed event to kind of roll into the year, and always pretty spectacular place to go visit. So that was kind of a fun way to get things rolling. And then I actually road tripped all the way down from Canada to California out there, and then back out to Sea Otter, which is it's always fun festival now. There's obviously a bit of racing going on there, but it's kind of a big industry get together. So busy weekend there, which was fun to see everyone. Did a little bit of XE racing again, and now I'm back regrouping up in Truckee. Kind of nice. The events are kind of spaced out with some weeks off, so all set and kind of getting things rolling into Whiskey Off-Road coming up in about 10 days or so.
Right. And you were taking odds for your own result at Sea Otter in the XCO. Did you get any? Was there bets? Like, what were people thinking?
Well, I always think I got a chance at Sea Otter with a few tricks up my sleeve, but no, it's just funny looking. I was looking where I was ranked going in there, and I was down to the one UCI point. So
I think I have more UCI points than you. This is good.
Well, I just moved up. Moved up about 600 spots, I think.
So you probably have
on my way back up.
Because that was an HC, right?
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay. You're beating me again. My fame was short-lived.
I got a few tricks, but I definitely didn't have the power to go with those young guys early on. But fun to see everyone there and jump in for sure.
Well, you were close. Like it was impressive, I thought. But
yeah, I was just kind of dangling on. There's the 2 XC races there, the shorter course, kind of HC race and the long course. And both days I just didn't have enough urgency to make that front group, but could have hung with them, but don't think I had the firepower to finish it off. But would have been fun to get up there in the lead group for sure.
Did you find, you did a great report, which I'll link to with lots of good photos and stuff from Moab Rocks. And like you say, it looks like an amazing event. I'm hoping we can get down and maybe do it even next year. But did you find the recovery from that? Because it was pretty close. Like you say, you sort of road trip back. Was that tough coming from, a stage race into like full gas world-class XCO?
Yeah, well, I'm glad I had a bit of a few efforts out in Moab to warm up, but I did get kind of a head cold right after Moab, and I mean that's the biggest thing for me for racing is staying fresh and healthy. So I was a little worried there. It was a bit hectic. I mostly building bikes too in the Sea Otter. I had to take 4 bikes down there for boost and getting that stuff already. It was a bit hectic, so it was nice to just finally get out and race. And I felt pretty solid at Sea Otter. Maybe a few more, XCO races would have helped me kind of hang a bit longer. But no, I mean, Moab's definitely physical place to ride, but been doing a lot of, off the bike skiing, and overall the body's pretty fit from the winter, so I handled that all right.
Yeah, I mean, I always, I was thinking about intros and just sort of what you've done and stuff. And, I definitely think about you as a consummate athlete. And I think over the years, certainly it just depends on the year's focus and stuff, but you've always sort of kept some skiing or some running or certainly basically, or a lot of types of biking in. Did you find this year, like, you were definitely doing more of the skiing and stuff just because you didn't have that pressure of the early World Cups?
I mean, definitely I did more skiing. It was more to do with the good winters, especially down here in Truckee, Tahoe. Came up here quite a bit more and got some more Nordic days. I mean, I always get a good stretch back at home. I was back home over Christmas for 2.5 weeks and didn't touch the bike and just did a bunch of Nordic and backcountry primarily is what I do. But, I used to be really focused on getting the core and in the gym a lot during my race career. And, maybe I kind of let that slip as I've been a bit more relaxed with my training regimen the last couple of years. I kind of felt like this year I kind of wanted to pay a bit more attention to that. So I kind of made sure when I was down in the Bay Area, just road riding, that I got in the gym. Usually I'd go, do about once or twice a week, like an hour, kind of core and strength using an exercise ball and light weights to make sure, have that overall body strength and everything's balanced out. I think a lot of people kind of underestimate how much that, muscular endurance, the upper body and core really contributes to kind of racing success and being able to recover and handle the mountain biking.
And when you were younger, we've talked about this on the previous podcast too, but you did do a lot of sort of stability ball and none of the weights were like crusher, right? But like you definitely were doing a lot of sort of that balance and, like you say, more muscular endurance even type sets and reps.
Yeah, I mean, I've never really used anything more than 5 or 10 pound weights, but just kind of a core upper body balance kind of circuit. I'll just rotate through exercises for an hour and when I go to the gym.
It must be like it was, if I remember, because of Jurg and stuff, it was probably fairly cross-country skier, like at least in its origin. Do you think that routine?
Well, I mean, I think we used to call it a Swiss ball, the exercise ball. So I think a lot of that, I mean, you'll see it in the Swiss athletes a lot too, kind of paying attention to those kind of core and strength exercises. And yeah, it's never big weights, but it's that kind of muscular endurance, which, I mean, these days when I can Nordic ski, that's my favorite way to do it, just to get in the core and upper body on the skis for sure. But when there's not much to do besides road riding in the Bay Area, I definitely tried to pay a little bit more attention to it this winter, and I feel like I'm feeling a lot better for it.
And I guess that's too where the, riding the bigger enduro bikes and stuff like that too is a little bit more, it takes a bit more strength, a bit more endurance even to move that around, I would imagine too.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm up in BC riding a bigger trail bike, it's definitely using the full body a lot more on those technical trails. And I mean, yeah, when I'm racing enduro, you need to have that strength in the upper body as well to keep pushing and handle the bigger hits.
So we've sort of gone into training here, so that's, I think, good. What I was sort of wondering, you've sort of touched on it a bit, sort of how you've undulated and maybe come back a bit to that core and stuff. Is there anything else, as you've sort of maybe focused more, I would say, on longer stuff, you're maybe doing a bit less XCO, a bit less cyclocross. Have you changed anything or gone away from anything?
I think it's more just as a aging athlete, I'd call myself. It's still the same kind of building blocks that I used in during my more World Cup days, but for me I'm doing maybe more racing or more longer racing, and the biggest thing I have to pay attention to is my recovery. I can't plan training straight after race. I have to really kind of wait for that feeling to come back, that my body's ready to get back into training. So I definitely have to really pay close attention to my recovery and how I'm feeling. Wait till I'm feeling good on the bike until I can get back into those building blocks that are still quite similar to what I was doing in XCO days. I never really felt my body reacted very well to a lot of really short intensity, the typical 3-minute intervals. I could do that kind of stuff and have a fantastic workout, but never really felt like it translated some of those workouts into my XCO success. So a lot of it's still obviously the basic long rides and some longer tempo workouts, and then for sure I'll throw in a bit more spicy kind of short on off stuff to kind of stimulate that high end in recovery. But pretty similar, just have to pay a lot more attention to my recovery and wait for the body to start feeling good and react from the hard racing.
I think that's a great answer, and I think a good lesson, for those of us that aren't, world class and coming from that background too, that watching how much racing and how much high intensity there is in that mix. How do you, aside from like your years of experience, like, is there any way that you're gauging sort of that feeling, when you can start training again after? So you had like Moab, say, and I guess you were really just coming into Sea Otter, but is there any way when you're ready to sort of start hitting a bit more volume or intensity?
I mean, a lot of it's just general feeling on the bike. I'll go out and try to start doing some 2-hour, 3-hour rides, but it's almost a feeling of good coordination along with heart rate levels. The heart rate is still like super low and not coming up under some intensity. Can definitely tell there's still some recovery to be done, but a lot of it's almost kind of subtle feeling like my legs are coordinated on the bike and ready to push. But yeah, just kind of paying attention to those sensations on the bike, and walking upstairs is always a good indicator. If you're feeling the legs to the top of the stairs, it's not time to start pushing.
Yeah, it's funny how that sort of just like easing out of bed, or like you say, the stairs are sometimes a good indicator.
Yeah, and like I said, I used to be able to kind of push through and load the body up, but I feel like these days I have to definitely be much more careful to not dig too deep in a hole, or it takes me a long time to come back. So it's definitely, I feel like last year I had a lot of commitments kind of in the spring season, so didn't feel like I came into the season with as solid fitness. So felt like especially some of the epic rides did a lot of damage to me, because I really pushed deep and took a long time, week to recover from some of the events. But I feel like I'm coming into this season a lot more solid fitness. So I'm kind of handling those race efforts a bit more and recovering a bit quicker, which is nice. Nice.
Yeah, I think we're all like, you want to, you either had a great race and you're so motivated, you want to like go back and start hitting it to get even fitter, right? Like if you won, you want to get even fitter, and then if it went crappy, you just want to like either go and punish yourself, or you got to go back to work, right? And it's that discipline sometimes, and that sort of longer term focus that, like you say, there's these whiskey races coming up in a few weeks, to just be patient, right? And it's tough.
Yeah, no, it's the hardest part. I mean, like I mentioned, got a bit sick after Moab, and I was obviously planning on taking a bit of rest, but got a bit sick and had to take 5 days off the bike, but knew it wasn't going to do me any good to try to get back out there early. Needed to, wait for my body to get healthy and feeling better. And yeah, sometimes that's really test the patience.
Okay. I think you touched on lots of great stuff as far as strength, and, you were on your skis for a lot of time without even touching your bike, and, taking breaks when you're sick and stuff. So that's some really good takeaways for us. There's a more high level question that just came in over the last hour or so. And you do pretty well at altitude, don't you? Generally, would you say that about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, typically, I mean, I spent a lot of time going back away, but back in the day, a lot of the, NORBA U.S. national races were at altitude, and found like I adapted and did well at those for sure.
Do you think it gets better over time? Like, even if you're not necessarily living at altitude or having like a tent or something, do you think like the more you go to altitude, like it gets better every time?
Yeah, for sure. Kind of in the early 2000s, I started going back and forth to Boulder at the time for 2 or 3 winters there, back and forth from altitude to sea level, and definitely felt like my body started to react and adapt quicker. But I think, I mean, part of it too is just, I mean, awareness that you're at altitude and you can't train and race like you're at sea level. For sure, if I'm, at got a long period at altitude, definitely that first week got to be really gentle on the body. If I haven't been at altitude for a while, and adapt. And I think a lot of my success in racing was kind of being aware of that. I mean, my pacing and strategy was always one of my strong suits. And I think that's where, typically a lot of sea level athletes can run into problems, is they try to start at altitude like they start at sea level. And, if you go over the limit at altitude, it's really hard to bring it back. So it's kind of, one in training, kind of easing into training at altitude really conservatively. And, even if it's just taking walks and hikes the first couple of days, and really being aware of the body. And once you get in the race, you got to be really aware of your body and not going into the red zone, because it's it's really hard to bring it back from there.
I think those are great concepts for sure. I think the as much as you can, if this is again sort of a high level topic in some ways, but I have people going to Leadville and stuff, and often, if they have the means, we try and get there ahead of time, or even go, earlier in the season, or if we're thinking more long term, which would always be great if we weren't just sort of cramming into it, the year before going, like you say, to Boulder and for vacation or something, right? Would you say, like, is there any rules that you follow even now? You're going to go and do X race at altitude, something like Breck Epic or something like that. Would you try and get there early, or do you, like, how do you, maybe Breck Epic's a bad example. Say Nationals were at altitude again. Do you try and get there early, or what do you do for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, luckily, part of the nice part for me, stay in Truckee here, and it's at 6,000 feet or 1,800 meters so that was for sure. Whiskey Off Road coming up is at altitude, up 7,000 feet down in Arizona. So for sure, part of my strategy for that was to come straight up to Truckee after Sea Otter, so have at least 10 days to kind of ease into that altitude before going down there to race. And so for me, if possible, I'd always try to get up at least 10 days, 2 weeks, or if I couldn't do that, it was going to be stay as low as I can and just go up for the race. I do that back in the day, Big Bear down in California. I'd stay down in Redlands and just drive up for the racing. It's kind of that in between which 2 or 3 days where it can be hit your body in the low period. But for sure, sometimes you can't focus on it too much, and you just kind of have to ignore the fact that you're at altitude if you can't prepare early or go up early, and not let it get to your head, because everyone's going to be suffering up there, and don't need any reason to make it worse on you mentally.
I think that's a great point. Like, a lot of times people overthink it and use it so much, but like you say, there's so much you can control as far as like the pacing, right? And ultimately, it's just knocking you back, whatever percentage of VO2, or like you're just going a little slower, right? And you gotta be a little more careful. But if you just sort of stick with it, like a lot of these races, Nationals is a mean one, but a lot of these endurance races, like it shouldn't be that big of a deal, right? If you've done the work for the race otherwise.
No, and I think, like any race, when you go to altitude, the biggest thing is not being too fatigued and healthy. So for anything, you don't want to, put in a massive training block and be super fatigued as you head up to altitude. Just like travel, it's nice to go, you're going to feel bad when you head up to, 6, 8, 10,000 feet, talking about Breck. brutal up there. But yeah, you don't want to go in already in a hole because it's going to be harder to climb out of that hole. So if you can, just taper into the altitude so you're not in too big of a hole.
Do you think, like, we've both done different types of respiratory training and stuff using Spiro Tiger or different apparati? Do you feel like that has helped over the years?
For sure. I used to do some of the, higher frequency Spiro Tiger training to kind of try to adapt the respiratory system for that increased load when I went up to race at altitude. So definitely that's a good strategy as well. It is a thin air, but a lot of it's the increased respiratory load. So doing some of the, higher intensity, higher frequency breathing like you're going to be doing in a race effort at altitude definitely be a good way to try to adapt if you don't have access to an altitude tent or staying up at altitude as well.
Yeah. It's a great tool. It's just like the barrier to get it right is tricky, and then having people committed to use it, I think, is always the tricky bit. But I'm the same in that I think that it definitely helps prepare so that you have options, when you find yourself, just even going really, really hard, if not at altitude going hard.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, that's, I think, something for people to think about. Again, I think a lot of this is just like world-class basics, I guess, right? Like you just, stay healthy, don't go too crazy, like ease into things. In the name of easing into things, the second question that's just come in is about the Coach K's cyclocross training program. I'll post the video for Coach K's cyclocross training program. So the question was, how much is the beer really that important for training in Europe for cyclocross? Or if someone was very good at push-ups, could they compensate, do you think? And I guess in terms of how maybe to the challenge? It's a very high-level question for a pretty jokey thing, but I'll post again Geoff's link.
We've talked about the importance of push-ups for sure, which I believe in. But if someone's adverse to alcohol, they can always do the workout with some La Croix. Just make sure to take some close-up video of your face when you're trying to do it with some bubbly La Croix.
Fair enough. We'll just let people's imagination run wild if they don't know about Coach K's cyclocross training program. But yeah, you did prepare with a lot of like bubbly water. You weren't actually like drinking beer before the push-up beer challenge.
Well, yeah, I think bubbly water is almost a higher degree of difficulty. So give that an effort, and then you can ease into the beer later if you're old enough.
I love it. It's like you're so serious about it. I love it. You got there. So anyhow, let's move on to more interesting, or maybe more specific. I guess they're both important. But we'll try and rhyme through these. But what I was wondering, a lot of people are doing gravel this race, and certainly you used a gravel bike at, I'm blanking on the name of the race in Michigan.
Iceman cometh, yeah.
Right. And are you doing much gravel this year? Like, what else are you doing on the gravel bike this year?
Well, yeah, I just actually officially signed up for Dirty Kansas this morning. So going back to that, there's a new event. I'm going back to Breck Epic, and this is going to be a doozy in August. I'm going to do the Breck Epic and then have one rest day and then do the SBT gravel race up in Steamboat Springs, 140-mile gravel race. So I'll see how I survive August. That'll be a tough stretch, but no, for sure. I'm lucky I got that open bike, which can take the 27.5 mountain bike tires as well as gravel and road. So that's what I rode at Iceman Cometh last year, which was a lot of fun jumping in the mountain bike race there on that bike. So definitely be looking forward to that one to finish off the year again too.
So you'll run 27.5 tires. What like width are you running?
In Iceman, I rode 27.5 by 2.1 Aspen tires, Maxxis mountain bike tires. So pretty similar to what I would run on a 29er probably. But yeah, the 27.5 version fits on the open, and if you've done a bit of cross, it's no problem riding those trails on the drop bars.
And I was going to ask you, it seemed like at Kansas, a bunch of the winners, and we will acknowledge that all of you have sponsorships, but we're running the Maxxis, is it the Rambler?
Yeah, that's what Ted was running. I'm not sure Josh was second, what tires he was on, but yeah, last year I rode
Katie ran the Aspen too.
or the Rambler. Yeah,
Sorry. Yeah.
I think she was on the Rambler. So that's what I rode last year. Definitely, that's a big conversation out there in Kansas. Tires and durability. Definitely, I ran the higher thread count ones last year, which usually the higher thread count is usually less durable. So there's different constructions of tires, and so I'll probably run the lower thread count 60 TPI tires, which will be a bit tougher, but definitely looking at the Rambler or maybe even some faster rolling tires for this year out there.
Cool. I think the other thing with these gravel races, and certainly Kansas, is just like the gear setup, right? Even for the one in Steamboat you're doing, that's a long day, right? Like, are you running hydration pack?
Yeah, so I work with Camelback. Out in Kansas, there's 3 feed zones. So my strategy last year actually pre-froze the Chase vest with a 1.5 liter bladder in there, so I could pick up a new Chase vest with that bladder and some nutrition from some gels goos in there at each feed zone. So it was pretty nice to have that frozen pack, as well as in that race I'd take a couple half frozen bottles on my bike every 3-4 hours there.
Okay. Would you, this is very specific, but would you get like a whole new vest and bladder? Like, you weren't stopping long to like stuff a new vest?
No,
you were
luckily,
whole new vest.
Yeah, lucky Colby from Camelback was out there, and he was actually my support crew. So yeah, I would just ditch the vest with him and grab a new one, and he'd lube up my bike. I'd throw on the vest and off to the next one.
Right. Yeah, those quick stops, right? It's tough. Like you say, some, the elites often get help, and, they're not as busy at the feed zones and stuff. But I think that's usually, like, that's a big thing. It's just same as Ironman, right? Like, you got to be in and out.
Oh, that was, I found it a bit ridiculous. That was kind of the hardest part of the race, was the feed zone attacks. So,
Really?
I mean, I was a bit too relaxed.
Tactics.
I mean, yeah, coming out of the feed zones was the hardest part. Guys who were organized, that's where they're trying to make a difference. And so
What?
I kind of chased back to the halfway feed zone and actually did a wheel change just to be safe, even though I'd kind of plugged my tire. But I had to do some serious chasing to regroup after a couple of the feed zones.
So now, like NASCAR or any sort of car racing, like, is there not some point where they're going to have to pit and then you just like take off?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to make a difference or get separation. I mean, especially with aero bars, that's another conversation. But yeah, guys, I was surprised. Out there was kind of calls for a neutral P stop, and people would keep riding hard, and we had to go under a down power line, which was a hazard single file, and guys were kind of attacking out the backside of the hazard. And so it was, people want to win that race bad, so they're taking it pretty serious.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's odd, some of these races, right? Like, they're not as regulated as a UCI race, which is good. But I found that at Leadville, just like feeding randomly on the course, and wheel support, like motorcycles appearing out of places for guys, and I was just like, what is going on? Like, I'm getting like, there's 2 feed zones in the entire race, and it's like people are getting fed like at the tops of climbs and like randomly on the road, and it's pretty wild sometimes, those races, but I guess that's what you sign up for.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas kind of jumped the shark last year, and it's gonna be really nuts this year with all the rumored Pro Tour road guys showing up, so should be quite the show.
Yeah, I don't know. We're having that with our Paris Sandcaster this year. There's this big, same like you're saying, hype, and we'll see how it all goes. But with all these road teams and Floyd Landis's team and stuff like this, and it's just like, I don't know. I'm like torn between not like just being like, I'm just gonna go ride my bike on my own and not try at them, and then wanting to go and fight. Right? I don't know. It's a tough one.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna enjoy it regardless. It's a fun event there, and I had some good fun stirring the pot out there, and got some ideas to stir the pot a bit more this year. So.
Are you gonna run like a really long aero bar now or something, just to spite them, or what?
No, I mean, I might just be making some statements with my outfit, so keep your eyes peeled for that.
Awesome. Okay. You mentioned plugs. That was on my list. Tire plugs, and this would be for mountain bikers, XCO right through, and then also certainly for gravel. What is your feeling on these? Like, I haven't had a ton of luck. I know Evan Guthrie really likes them. I don't know. Like, have you had success with these tire plugs?
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't really used them until last couple of years, but bit of a technique, but they can be really a lifesaver getting that tire fixed and on the road again. I mean, there's definitely a bit of technique to make sure they kind of get stuck in there and don't fly out. But I mean, I had to use one to do a quick fix at Kansas, and I've used them at Cascadia to finish the day. And I mean, the brutal one was Bentonville, if you heard about that race with 17 of the top 20 guys flatted, and
Wow.
I had to use 4 plugs to kind of make it across the finish line. But they, there's different types and different thicknesses, but I had a pretty good slash in my for a good snake bite on the top of the tread, and had to use a big fat one and a small one to kind of plug the slash and get the bead sealed as well. But it's definitely, especially there, it was really muddy and thunderstorms, and would have been really tough to get the tire off and tube in and change the valves. So it's definitely a nice quicker fix if you can get them to seal. You just kind of make sure you push them in and flatten them out so they don't get pulled out by the train.
Right. What brand do you use?
I've used a couple different ones. I work with One Up, which kind of makes a handy pump with EDC tool, and you can kind of nest a little tire plug at the bottom of the EDC tool, so it kind of stays clean in there. And that's what I was using out at Dirty Kansas. Also, just I've used some of the Dyna plugs as well, which work really well as well.
Okay, yeah, I think I saw Ted King was talking about Dyna plugs. And I was wondering if that's because he sort of mentioned it in passing in the thing I saw, and I wasn't sure if that. So that's like, would that be like a bigger, would those be thicker?
Yeah, I mean, they make a couple trick little devices. One that can actually use with the CO2. I haven't used that one, but I mean, yeah, they're from the auto side and came on the mountain bike, and there's kind of different thicknesses of plugs that take up more or less space depending on what kind of puncture.
Right. Okay, let's move on then. I don't want to belabor the technicality of things. Let's switch over to mountain bike stage racing, and it's similar but different in some ways, I guess, because you're doing multiple days. What do you do as far as food and calories? Like, how do you think about that for something like a mountain bike stage race like the one you just did in Moab?
I mean that really varies. Moab, for instance, we were racing pretty early in the morning. It was quite cold, even snowed there one day. So the hydration was really not a concern at all. I mean, we're still 2-hour stages, but it was near freezing, or definitely single digit Celsius. So there, I barely drank half a bottle. But for BC bike race, for those longer days where it can get warmer, it's definitely a bigger concern. And I'll race with a chase vest there every day, just to make sure I stay on top of hydration. And certainly when technical trails like a BC bike race, it's really hard to kind of consistently grab for your bottle when you're trying to charge it in the single track. So it's really a nice way to be able to just grab the hydration hose and drink whenever you want on the trail. As well, it's just, I find with the pack at those races, it's just simple. Every morning, you don't have to think about grabbing your spare parts and tools. You just have it all in your pack. You refill the bladder, and you're ready to go for the next day, which keeping things simple on a long stage race often is nice mentally.
Yeah, that's definitely the trick, right? Is that routine day to day during the stage race. Do you have like a preferred in something like that where, we're not racing necessarily at XCO pace, but still going hard? Like, what do you eat, I guess, during one of those stage races?
Yeah, I mean, I work with Goo Energy. So typically I'll use a rock train drink, which is pretty high calorie, usually about 250 calories a bottle. So in general, I take a lot of calories from the drink, which makes it pretty simple. And then usually carry a couple Goo packs as well. Find definitely a race effort. Any kind of bars is kind of harder to get down with the breathing, and a couple Goos is always makes it pretty easy to top off if feeling a little bit low on a long day. But for me in the stage racing, it's almost more important the recovery. So I'll definitely try to get in some of the Goo recovery drink right after the race, and for me that's a big thing. Getting, as you know, getting the food and recovery in day to day in a stage race.
Yeah, awesome. And I think that's, sometimes we miss that, and you'll see the recreational riders coming in, they're out there for more of a tour, right? And they probably could use some of those solid foods because they're not, maybe quite working at that like top of VO2 type attacks and stuff like this, right? They're out there for a longer period. So it's always tough sometimes when, we have recommendations and stuff and how that changes based on, the goals or the duration of the event.
Yeah, I mean, it's I always try to plan ahead and have a little recovery drink ready. I mean, it's easy to getting into socializing and hanging out at the race, and sometimes it a couple minutes turns into an hour and a half, 2 hours before you get real food. So I find like, yeah, if I can have that recovery drink and some of the snacks at a stage race finish, it kind of gives me that buffer to kind of be more relaxed and hang out and make my way to some real food.
Yeah. I think that's an awesome tip. A lot of times we don't think about that, but certainly the name of the game in those stage races is, consistency over the number of days, right? It's no one day that's going to make or break you even, likely. So that's awesome. I love that. Is there anything else as far as, bike setup or gears, bags, that sort of thing that you sort of really change for a stage race?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing is to, practice how you're going to race and carry things for the stage race. I know, Kansas was a lot of prep, figuring everything out, just self-navigation. You got to figure out carrying if your navigation device doesn't have enough battery power, figuring out I had to strap on a little backup power unit or battery to make sure I had the navigation to the end. But mostly bags. I mean, my bike has room for one of those little bento box bags. So it actually has the braze-on mounts. And I tried training with that because it was a nice little way to carry food and stuff right on the front of the top tube, but it just didn't work for me just with my pedal stroke in the knees. Right. So it's important to test that stuff out and just see fit and function, and little stuff like a lot of hydration packs come with a kind of over length hose, and you can cut the hose to make sure it's the right length and easy to use, and getting the straps and everything set so you're not fiddling with that stuff mid race.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I call that gameplay, right? Like you want to sort of play the game before you get there. And I love that. Like I hate bento boxes so badly for some reason. I just hate the jiggling and it just sitting there. But for some people, they love it, And in Ironman, I did end up using it just because it's sort of, like you say, it's strapped onto the bike. And in Ironman, you sort of just hop on your bike and go. You don't sort of have your pockets, and you're not wearing a hydration pack. But that's awesome that you found, your knees ended up hitting it, and something that could have been helpful ended up being a pain in the butt, right? But you do hear stories like that, right? Like we get into the race, last minute change, and ruins the day. Or that hose is a great example. I love that, and I wouldn't have even thought of that you could make that hose like the perfect length, so that like when you drink 1,000 times over Kansas or 100 times or whatever. I love that. Okay. So I wanted to, I don't know if we're going to have an argument. I doubt it, but, you're very open about your detesting doping, which I don't think is an odd stance to take. But just recently we had a younger or a very successful female cyclist tested positive. which was sort of a shame. And you had tweeted, and I'll link to all this, sort of that the gist of the tweet was that, you know, people should be watching sort of their teammates and sort of just watching for people who are silent even. And I was like, I don't know if I understand that. So I just wanted to talk through that, to understand sort of your perspective on that, I guess, on silence, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not don't want to cast judgment on, you know, individual persons until the process goes this way, but I've just found, you know, a couple of points. I mean, over my career, you can really, it's interesting to watch different people's, you know, and opinions and statements and words in reaction to doping. It really can tell you a lot about their stance or acceptance of it. But for me, it's really important for clean athletes to speak up. 'Cause, I mean, I think it's one of the easiest justifications for people who decide to cheat is their justification that everyone else is doing it, so it's no big deal. And that was part of the initiative with Cycling Canada's Race Clean Own Your Victory. It's really important for successful athletes to speak up and that have had success and say that they've done it clean and make a strong stance on it. So the young riders who are struggling to, you know, find that success know that not everyone is doing it, and you can achieve that success clean in sport. And there's many good reasons to race clean, and just as mentally and lifestyle, but just another opportunity to kind of, you know, raise that discussion. And I just find it, pretty curious watching everyone's reaction. Particularly with Betsema, but in general, I mean, if you're a clean athlete, you should be pissed when you see news like that. And I think it's positive for people who feel strongly about clean sport to speak up, so it's not normalized.
Yeah, and I think I understand that. I think that makes sense. I think I was like, so if you don't say anything, then you're in the wrong. But I don't think that's what you're necessarily saying. But you are saying that we shouldn't, especially if you're in a position to say something or you know, influence a group, or you run a club or something like that, right? Like there's the difference between being silent or just going along with stuff. You know. Yeah,
no, it's just all the context of, it's interesting. I mean, not saying that being silent, I'm not saying the silence wrong, but just encouraging people who are for clean sport to speak up instead of, you know, the omerta in cycling to not say anything or not have an opinion. It's important for people to clean up and, you know, show their frustration at times.
Yeah, and the one that came to mind for me that I think we share, and I know you've been vocal and sort of called people out a few times over it, but, you know, some of the clubs, and sometimes it's almost by accident, or you know, like you say, people aren't paying attention, and it gets sort of pushed through. But some of the, like, post-doping, like, return to coaching or return to positions, or like the worst I think is, you know, paying for someone to come and do like a fondo or something with a club. You know, that obviously is going to have kids and have younger athletes part of it, right? And I think that, to me, is like a way that a lot of us who do run clubs or coaching or whatever can sort of speak up, that, like, you can't hire then people after that they've been found guilty, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, it depends on your stance on clean sport, but I think if it's something you believe in, I mean, I certainly wouldn't hire a former doper to come speak to my kids if I had but I think in general, I think some of it's pretty innocent. People have pretty short memories, and a lot of people new to the sport, which is great, but don't have a perspective on the history of sport or what's happened in the past, so they're a bit oblivious to it. But for sure, I mean, it was definitely, in my opinion, when I was involved with Cycling Canada, that we don't want to associate with former dopers and make a really strong stance for clean sport and supporting the clean athletes who made good choices in cycling, to support and promote those athletes and not, you know, work with athletes that made poor decisions. We got plenty of good role models to work with, and not that I wish those people any harm in their private life, and they're free to pursue anything involved in around the cycling world, but I think it's definitely the public organizations like Cycling Canada and Cycling BC, where I'm from in BC. It's really encouraged them to take a strong stance and not associate with those people.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point you made, that, like, again, you know, in a personal relationship, you know, I think we do want to be forgiving to people and give them another chance, and we certainly don't even need to you know, bar them from ever participating in sport again. I don't think that's, you know, these people are going to go on and have kids, and hopefully we do have them back, but I think it's a tough gray area, right? Like, how far back are they allowed to come, right? And it's a gray area, right? There's no consensus.
Yeah, I mean, it's all shades of gray. I mean, there's some that there's been a lot more truth and reconciliation, but some people that have never really, you know, admitted and just kind of put their head down and hoping everyone was going to forget about what happened. And, you know, I was really impacted by it a lot through my career, so I certainly haven't forgotten about a lot of the transgressions that personally affected me and a lot of my friends, and you know, happy to speak up for clean sport and remind people of what happened when need arises.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I was back and forth whether we should talk about, because it is sort of a, you know, a negative thing in some ways, but I think it is important, and if, you know, we can just communicate the message of, you know, there's lots of great stories out there. You know, there's the Catherine Pendrells or whoever you want to pick, who are, you know, really nice people and really great, and are doing it, you know, fairly real. So, yeah. So I think that's maybe enough on that. I don't know if you have anything else. I think that is summing it up. One more thing I think I want to end on a slightly more upbeat note. You know, you're doing all these different events, and, you know, I know you certainly go into races like Sea Otter with betting on yourself, which I think is still, it's not a bad bet. I would have taken that bet. I've seen it happen before when, you know, it was close and whatever, and you do have those tricks. What I'm wondering is, you know, going into any event, even something like Kansas, you know, it's a pretty unknown. Some of these races you've never done before, like certainly Kansas you hadn't done. How do you think about, you know, success at that event? We've tried to hash out a lot of, like, why we do sport here on the podcast and setting goals, you know, especially for people who don't have, you know, you've been, you know, X place at the Olympics, you've done Sea Otter millions of times, so you have an idea of the outcome. But how do you set, you know, that success? Like, you were 10th at Sea Otter, that's not first, you've been first. So on paper, someone might be like, oh, Geoff Kabush must be super upset. But, you know, how do you come away from that with some positives?
No, I mean, I have to be realistic about Sea Otter, but, you know, I have nothing really to prove from a racing perspective anymore, personally. But, you know, I still really enjoy racing, and, you know, most of all, just really enjoy riding my bike and feeling fit and healthy. So, you know, I really enjoy lifestyle, and I mean, I'm definitely more focused on the marketing opportunities I can, you know, provide for my sponsors. And I mean, obviously I'm still competitive, but I definitely have to, you know, pick and choose events where I can have success and create an impact. And I mean, I think that's the nice thing for me. I'm really a diverse athlete, so I got a lot of different events and places I can, you know, make an impact. So it kind of takes the pressure off. You know, some people, they're strictly gravel racings, and their season really, you know, revolves around success. Dirty cans are not, but I mean, I can go out there and, you know, have some fun and stir the pot with a editorial about aero bars, but, you know, still have goals, you know, for sure. You know, BC bike race is, you know, one that I really want to do well this year, but, you know, that's one that's really well suited to my, you know, technical skills and strategy and endurance. And so, I mean, I'm realistic. It's going to be tough for me to be at the front of a pure XC race, but I can certainly try and have fun. And, you know, Sea Otter is much more kind of a festival now, so it's really important for me to connect with all the companies that support me there, and, you know, come up with ideas to have fun and get the messages out there for the stuff I'm representing.
Do you think, in terms of think of process goals and stuff, do you think, you know, whether it's Sea Otter, you can pick the race, I guess, but targets for the day as far as where you want to be maybe off the start, or I'm trying to think of other process goals you might set, but Sea Otter, you mentioned your tricks, so I wonder, like, around those tricks, are some of those tricks, there must be things that if you do them they might work or they might not, but that's sort of feeding into that success of the day. Do you think, is there anything there?
Well, I mean, yeah, tricks at Sea Otter.
You don't have to spill all your tricks, but
No, they're actually going to production, so I'm gonna have to stockpile them. But use those Max Light tires. I don't know if you've ever used them, but they're basically road tires, and Sea Otter's a bit of a road race. So, I mean, it's a big points race, but obviously, if I don't finish, it's no big deal for me. So I can kind of roll the dice with some light tires, or I'm looking for any kind of advantage I can get, and starting farther back, it gives me a bit of an advantage to kind of roll up on the pavement to get closer to the front group, and I can, try to make things like that work, or take a bit more risk to try to give myself a chance with the young guys. And it's I don't know, I enjoy pushing myself still, and it's for sure fun. I mean, if I don't have that success, on the podium, it's like I said, I got nothing to prove, so it's no big deal. Still, there's lots of ways, kind of, as I said, diversified myself as an athlete. Whether it's, I can still go to a race and write some articles for Pink Bike or whatever, and I just kind of in a good place at the right time again in my career with popularity of a lot of the events in North America. They're more endurance and slightly XC-ish events and XC product coming out for me to promote. So it's I'm just really enjoying the events and the people and riding my bike these days. So it's makes it easy when I'm having fun and like I said, I just enjoy the feeling of feeling healthy and feeling good. I think once you know that feeling, it's easy to take care of yourself and be healthy and enjoy where I'm at right now.
Perfect. Well, I don't want to take you too long. I'm sure you finished your coffee and stuff that you were going to have while we chatted. So I do appreciate you taking the time, and I think some really good takeaways as far as training and gravel training and doing stage races and all sorts of crazy adventures. So hopefully folks can sort of take that and put it into a successful summer here. Can you give us sort of a quick rundown of where people might run into you over the next few months? I know there's a lot of events and we've talked about a few, but maybe just a quick rundown where people might find you.
Yeah, no, I mean, for sure, if people are at events, feel free to come up and chat or ask questions, but be at the Epic Rides, most of them. Heading over to France in June, so I'm not sure if I'll make it to the Carson City off-road, but that and Kansas and back up to BC Bike Race, or Downeyville will be out in Colorado for, like I said, Breck Epic and the SBT Gravel, and a little bit of cross, a little bit of everything, but schedules on my, more or less schedule for the seasons up on my website, geoffkabush.com, so you can kind of track me down there, or social media, shoot me a message. I'm at Geoff Kabush on most things, but happy to chat and answer some questions.
Awesome. Well, I hope you have a good day. Thank you again for chatting with us, Geoff.
Sounds good. Good talking to you, Peter. Take care.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Consummate Athlete podcast. You can check out my stuff over at theoutdooredit.com or by following me on Instagram and Twitter at Molly J. Herford. And you can check out Peter's coaching, training plans, blogs, all that fun stuff over at smartathlete.ca or by following him on Twitter and Instagram at Peter Glassford. And if you want to support this show and other awesome podcasts, please check out wideanglepodium.com for show info, other podcasts, bonus content, and to become a donating member so you can get all of that rad behind the scenes content and help keep shows like this on the air. And lastly, if you're enjoying this podcast and all the information that we're bringing to you every single week, do us a solid and pop into iTunes to leave us a rating and review. It takes you about 2 seconds. You can do it on your computer, you can do it on your phone, and it really helps us out. Thanks so much, and we will see you next week.